I'd asked you if you'd met Lucille
Yeah.
at the house.
Yeah. Actually, when we were doing the Slivovitz interview, Lucille, it was a long one because Louis felt, I mean, I was delighted because he really felt like talking and he said a lot of stuff. One of the most interesting things he said, which was not picked up on by anybody to this day and denied by Kid Ory's daughter, he said that Muskrat Ramble, he said, it was mine, but Ori named it, so I let him have it. But I think that is an important thing. To Muskrat Ramble is by Louis, just like Strutting with Some Barbecue, obviously is by him, and Lil Armstrong claimed it. And when Joe Glazer wanted to sue, Louis said, no, let her have it, she needs the money more than I do. So that's it. But anyway, I mean, during the Slivovitz interview, Lucille would, you know, we were taping, so she was quiet, but she would open the door once in a while and look in and sort of gesture to Louis like this, you know, that, but he wasn't about to end it, so that was, but, oh, I met Lucille quite a few times, and she was always very nice to me, and met her also posthumously. But she did one other thing that I regret, and it holds her partly responsible for. When Louis died, his funeral should have been something on the order of Louis Armstrong's, which was held at St. John's, the biggest indoor space in the U.S., and was an event like the service for a head of state or a king or something. She had service at a small church in Queens, and that was the wrong thing to do. There were lots of people outside who couldn't get in, and there were even people who should have been there. And she made sure that Nelson Rockefeller was there. Well, F-U-C-K, Nelson Rockefeller, you know. But there were a lot of friends who couldn't get in. And it should have been a public event of magnitude. And instead it was held in this small church where I could say people were outside, at least 100, I don't know. And Louis himself had said that when he died, you know, he would hope that the cats would have a blow over him, you know. That happened in New Orleans. In New Orleans they had a protest, but, you know, he wasn't there. But, in a way to atone for that, Louis was in state on Park Avenue, the Park Avenue Armory. I don't like open coffin. I try to avoid them. Only when it's somebody who was really close, I'll take a look and usually regret that I did. But in the case of Louis, he was there, and he's Louis Armstrong. He looked so, you know, he looked so peaceful, and he looked like he was sleeping. You know, there was nothing at all unpleasant about it. And that was, he was lying in state there, and, you know, people were lined up along Park Avenue, and that was fitting. That was fitting. The funeral wasn't, but that was something that was to Lucille's credit. Yeah.
To get back to the man in life, I come from a line of people who talk about what they're eating all the time. Did you ever have a meal with Louis?
Did I have a meal with, not a real meal, like, oh, yes, what am I saying? Of course I did, and that was rather late. And Louis was, what was the English guy who had a television program? He had a la Carson thing. He had a house band that was led by Billy Taylor.
David Frost.
David Frost. So Louis was on David Frost, And he had invited me to, to come backstage and come and see me. No, not to be on the air with him, but to be there. And he wanted me to be there for one thing an LP had just come out of the All Stars, and it had a credit on it that said produced by Louis Armstrong. And he was very proud of that. So he made a point of showing that to me on the finger. But he just, I don't know why, but this is after the downbeat issue, whatever. I mean, I'm delighted that, that Louis liked me well enough to, and he didn't do it so that I should write about him. I think I thought it would be fine. But anyway, there are two things that I remember about that. One was that I was in the dressing room with him before the show, and the other guest of the show was Bing Crosby. They hadn't seen each other in a long time. And Bing came in and they embraced, they hadn't seen each other in a long time. And before that, Louis knew that, that he was going to see Bing, and he was practicing in the dressing room. He had a little wooden practice mute in the horn, and he started playing Pennies from Heaven, which is from the movie that Crosby produced, and which was the first film in which he had real credit, above the, whatchamacallit, which was the first for a black entertainer. So anyway, to see them embrace, it was a privilege. And it reminded me of the fact that there had been an interview with Louis in the New York Times where he was asked about his friendship with Bing and said some very warm things about him. But then he said, I was never invited to his home. But the thing was, nobody was invited. Bing had a strange home life, had a strange relationship or non-relationship with his then wife, and we know that his kids were not necessarily, I don't want to go into that because and Gary Giddens is taking care of Bing, and it's an excellent biography. But anyway, Louis had this little practice mood, and he played Pennies from Heaven, and I always remember that. Beautiful. And after that, Louis insisted on taking me to dinner at Sardi's, which was nearby, and it was just the two of us, and I felt so, so the menu, I ordered something, and he said, don't do that, have the steak, which was the most expensive thing on the menu. So he insisted that I have the steak. And then he, he had just a couple who were working for them at home, and I thought, and the guy was the driver, a nice Cadillac, So he insisted on taking me home, before he went home. So I lived on 15th Street then. So that was the last time I saw Louis, actually. That was the last time I saw him. And, he was an unbelievably sweet, nice person. That just exuded from him. And that, of course, comes out in music. I was listening to the other day, I like to listen to it. Hugues Panassier, the famous French critic, said that he always played a Louis record before he went to sleep. I sometimes do that too, and I did it recently, and it was the Decca thing on Mosaic, a big thing, which I did the notes for. But I hadn't listened in a long time. And I said these things, what he could do with a fairly, you know, undistinguished piece of music. Not that some of these, you know, pop tunes were very nice, but they were nothing spectacular. They were not, they haven't become part of the great American songbook. But no matter what the material was, he could do such remarkable things with it, and he put so much feeling into the lyrics. And he never messed up a lyric, you know, and his pronunciation, he may have had sometimes, he had a little bit of a New Orleans accent, which resembles a Brooklyn accent in certain ways. But he knew how to put the meaning of a lyric. Not popular song lyrics are not necessarily great poetry, but they do have meaning. They usually, what are they about? They're about love, you know, 90% of them are. But he would get the ultimate meaning out of these sometimes fairly superficial lyrics. He would put so much, you know, he put thought into that and what he was saying, and his diction, everything, and of course his time. So he could take a song like that somebody else wouldn't really know what to do with, and turn it into what looked like, you know, very, you know, thoughtful, excellent piece of music, whatever. He was a transformer. I mean, you could have given him a piece of shit, you know, and he would have done something with it.
He believed in what he was singing. I think that's central. He never stood at a distance from it.
You're absolutely right. He didn't distance himself from it, but he also had an uncanny ability to get to the essence of it and to get whatever was there. If there was, and there had to be something there, he would extract it. And he was so fast. I mean, that's the one time that I was privileged to be in a recording studio when he was recording a portion of the Real Americans, or the Dave and Iola Brubeck thing. And there's a beautiful, perhaps the best thing in there is a thing called Summer Song. And it's not a simple song at all. It's not a standard ABA, you know. It was just Dave and Pops, the two of them, and you know, Dave handed him the sheet, you know, and he sat down at the piano, and Louis looked over. I always liked to see Louis putting on his glasses. You know, he had black horn glasses, and it made him look scholarly, you know, and I knew already that he was an astonishing sight reader. I mean, people don't know. I mean, he was a great musician. I'm talking about technically, you know. He played in big bands before he became famous. He was the ultimate in sight reading, you know. I mean, you could pick up a thing and boom, he had it down. I don't think Dave knew that, but that's not the point here either. The point is what I said before, how he could get into the essence of something. So, you know, Dave sat down at the piano. It was an upright, it was a studio, just a rehearsal basically. And Louis picked it up, and Dave played an introduction, and Louis started to sing. He had it down on first attempt. He just had it down, and he had absorbed the essence, the true essence of the song, you know, and Dave couldn't believe it, and he did cry. He didn't sob or anything, but he was absolutely extraordinary. And a similar thing happened with Azalea and Duke. When Duke had never been able to find anybody to do this song, he tried to have various people try to record it, including a singer named Chester Crumpler. I love that name. and didn't work with Louis again. He handed him the sheet. Louis sat down, put his glasses on, and looked at it, and he said, "Okay, let's try it." Again, it was just a piano. And again, you know, Duke just couldn't believe how Louis captured this thing. And this is certainly, it's a more complex song than the Summer Song. And the lyrics are, you know, they're out there. They're by Duke himself. I mean, he rhymes azalea with azalea, nothing can azalea, my true love azalea. And it's, Louis, he just, I mean, he had an extraordinary ability to get to the essence of things. And I think he had that in his human relationships too, and even in everyday matters. I mean, I'd sit in the dressing room and there would be people coming in, you know, who were looking for a handout and so on. He would size it up, you know. And the amount that he had a role, you know, because he knew that would happen. But what he would give somebody would line up with whether he believed the tale or not, you know.
Okay.
It could range from $10 to $100. You know.
Let's hold off because of the
Noise.
machinery.
I'm
for a
sorry
minute.
about that.